Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine waking up tomorrow morning, not in your warm bed, not under electric lights, and not in a world where clean water comes from a tap. Instead, you open your eyes inside a small home beside the Nile River, more than 4,000 years ago. The air is already hot. There is no refrigerator. No medicine cabinet. No bathroom. No air conditioning. And somewhere outside, the sound of animals is slowly mixing with the voices of people beginning another long day. You might think ancient Egypt was a beautiful world of golden temples, powerful pharaohs, and mysterious pyramids. But here is the question. If you were suddenly transported to ancient Egypt, could you survive even one ordinary day? Would you know what to eat? Would you know where to sleep? Would you know how to stay clean? And, perhaps most importantly, would you understand the strange rules of everyday life well enough to make it through the night? Tonight, we are going to find out. Slowly, quietly, we will travel back through thousands of years of history and follow an ordinary day in ancient Egypt, from the moment the sun rises over the Nile until the darkness settles over the river. We won't hurry. There will be no battles to fight, no treasure to find, and no empire for you to conquer. Instead, we will simply live. We will wake up in an ancient Egyptian home. We will walk through dusty streets. We will discover what ordinary people ate, how they worked, how they slept, how they dealt with illness, insects, heat, and dirt. And along the way, you may discover that the greatest mystery of ancient Egypt isn't how the pyramids were built. It is how ordinary people managed to live there every single day. So take a slow breath. Let your shoulders relax. The modern world can wait until morning. For now, the Nile is flowing quietly in the darkness. And somewhere, thousands of years ago, the first light of dawn is beginning to touch the rooftops. Your day in ancient Egypt is about to begin. The first thing you notice is the heat. Before the sun has fully risen, the little room is already warm. The walls around you are made from sun-dried mud bricks, thick enough to keep some of the heat outside, but not enough to make the room truly cool. There is no alarm clock. No phone. No sound of an engine starting somewhere in the street. Instead, you wake naturally to the quiet movements of the people around you, the distant calls of animals, and the soft sounds of a settlement slowly coming alive. You sit up. For a moment, you might wonder where you are. Then you remember. Ancient Egypt. Thousands of years before modern cities, electricity, and running water. Your sleeping place is simple. Perhaps a raised wooden bed covered with woven material, or a mat placed directly on the floor. Your blanket is light because the nights can be surprisingly cool, but you know the morning heat will soon return. You step outside. The first sunlight reaches across the rooftops. And there it is. The Nile. The great river is more than just beautiful scenery. It is the reason this civilization exists. Almost everything around you depends on it. Water. Food. Transportation. Farming. Trade. Even the rhythm of everyday life follows the river and its seasons. You walk toward the water. The ground beneath your feet is dusty. There are no paved sidewalks waiting for you. No traffic lights. No cars. Instead, people move on foot. Some carry baskets. Others lead animals. Farmers are already preparing for another day of work. You begin to realize something strange. Ancient Egypt looks peaceful from a distance. But surviving here requires constant effort. The sun will become stronger. Food must be prepared. Water must be collected. Work must be done. And even the simplest task, staying clean, will require planning. You look back toward the small house behind you. There is no bathroom waiting inside. No shower. No cold glass of water. And no easy escape from the heat. The day has only just begun. Yet already, you are beginning to understand the question we asked at the start. Could you really survive one ordinary day here? For now, the answer is still uncertain. So you follow the river deeper into the waking city and discover what an ancient Egyptian morning actually smelled, sounded, and felt like. As you walk closer to the Nile, the morning becomes busier. The river is already awake. Small boats move slowly across the water, their wooden hulls cutting through the quiet surface. Fishermen prepare their nets. Farmers gather near the riverbank. People carry clay jars, baskets, and bundles of goods from one place to another. You begin to understand why the Nile was more than a river to the ancient Egyptians. It was their road, their source of food, their supply of water, and, in many ways, the heart of their entire world. You kneel beside the water and look at your reflection. It feels peaceful. But there is something you quickly notice. The water isn't going to arrive at your home through a pipe. If you want water, someone has to collect it. A person carries a clay container down toward the river, fills it, and then carries the heavy weight back. You watch as people repeat the same task again and again. There are no water trucks. No faucets. No bottles waiting in a refrigerator. Just the river and human effort. You take a sip. The water feels cool compared with the growing heat. But you have no way of knowing exactly what is in it. This is one of the uncomfortable realities of ancient life. People understood cleanliness, but they did not understand bacteria and microscopic disease in the way we do today. There are insects around the river. Mosquitoes rise from the water. Flies circle around food. Animals move nearby. And the warm climate makes everything happen faster. Still, life continues. A woman nearby begins preparing food for her household. Bread is one of the most important foods in the ancient Egyptian diet. Grain has to be processed. Flour has to be prepared. Dough has to be mixed. And then the bread must be baked. You smell smoke drifting through the morning air. For a moment, it is almost comforting, the smell of freshly baked bread, the sound of people talking. The movement of boats on the river. The warmth of the sun. It feels strangely peaceful. But then you realize something. Almost everything you see requires work. Food requires work. Water requires work. Travel requires work. Even staying cool requires work. And the sun is climbing higher. Your first morning in ancient Egypt is only beginning soon. The peaceful riverbank will become hotter, louder, and much more difficult. So you follow the smell of bread into the settlement, wondering what an ordinary ancient Egyptian breakfast actually looked like. You follow the smell of warm bread into the settlement. For an ancient Egyptian family, bread is not just something to eat. It is one of the most important parts of daily life. Grain is ground into flour, mixed with water, shaped by hand, and baked near a fire. You watch the process carefully. There is no supermarket. No packaged food. No delivery. If you want breakfast, someone has to make it. Beside the bread, there may be onions, dates, beans, vegetables, or fish from the Nile. It sounds simple. But now imagine eating almost the same basic foods again and again, day after day. There is no refrigerator to preserve your food. No microwave. No instant meal waiting for you. Everything depends on what can be grown, caught, stored, or prepared that day. You take a piece of bread. It is warm. For a moment, the ancient world doesn't feel so strange. You sit near the doorway and eat while the settlement grows louder around you. But the peaceful breakfast doesn't last long. The sun is rising higher. And somewhere outside, your day's work is already waiting. You finish your bread, stand up, and step into the growing heat of ancient Egypt. The sun is higher now. The gentle morning has disappeared, replaced by heat that seems to rise from the ground itself. You walk through the settlement, following the people heading toward their daily work. Some carry baskets. Some lead animals. Others walk toward the fields beside the Nile. If you were an ordinary Egyptian, much of your life would be shaped by work. Farmers depended on the river and its yearly flooding to make the land fertile. When the water retreated, dark, rich soil remained behind. That soil was precious. It meant crops. And crops meant food. You watch workers moving through the fields beneath the growing sun. There are no tractors. No machines. No comfortable shade waiting nearby. Most tasks are done with simple tools and human strength. You begin to feel the heat on your skin. Sweat runs down your face. And suddenly, the ancient world feels much less romantic. This is not a picture from a museum. You are standing inside it. The sun continues to rise. The work continues. And you realize that for many people in ancient Egypt, there was no simple way to escape the demands of the day. You look toward the Nile. The water is still calm. But the fields are calling. And your first real day of work is about to begin. The fields stretch quietly beside the Nile. You begin to understand that the river does more than provide water. It decides when people can plant, when they can harvest, and whether a family will have enough food to survive the coming months. An Egyptian farmer might spend long hours working beneath the sun, using simple wooden tools to prepare the soil. The work is repetitive, physical, and exhausting. You try to help. After only a short time, your hands begin to ache. The sun feels heavier with every passing hour. There is no air conditioner to cool you down. No machine to do the hardest work. If you become tired, you simply have to stop for a moment, drink some water, and continue. Around you, life keeps moving. Someone is carrying grain. Another person is repairing a tool. Animals move between the fields. In the distance, a small boat travels slowly along the Nile. You begin to notice something fascinating. Ancient Egypt was not simply a civilization of pharaohs and pyramids. Most people were ordinary people. They woke up, worked, ate, raised families, worried about food, and went to sleep, just like people today. The difference was how much harder many simple things could be. Even a journey that might take minutes in a modern car could require hours on foot or by boat. Even getting fresh water required effort. Even preparing a meal could take much of the morning. And when the sun reached its highest point, the heat became almost overwhelming. You look toward the shade of a nearby building. For the first time, you understand why shade was not simply comfortable in ancient Egypt. It was precious. You slowly walk toward it, listening to the distant sounds of the river. Your first day is only halfway through. And you still haven't discovered one of the most important parts of ancient Egyptian life. How people actually kept themselves clean in a world without modern bathrooms. You walk toward the shade of a small building. The temperature is still rising, and for a moment, standing away from the direct sunlight feels like a luxury. But there is something else you are beginning to wonder about. How did people in ancient Egypt stay clean? You look around for a shower. There isn't one. A bathtub? Not inside the little home. A modern bathroom? It simply doesn't exist. But that doesn't mean ancient Egyptians ignored cleanliness. In fact, cleanliness was surprisingly important to them. People could wash themselves using water from the Nile or from containers carried back to their homes. Wealthier people had greater access to servants and private washing areas, while ordinary families had much simpler arrangements. You watch someone pour water over their hands and face. It feels refreshing. But washing every day is not always as easy as turning a handle. Water has to be collected, carried, stored, and used carefully. You begin to realize how valuable a simple bucket of clean water would have been. Ancient Egyptians also used oils and natural substances to care for their skin. Oils could help protect the body from the dry climate and intense sunlight. And then there was another problem. Dust. The dry Egyptian environment meant that dust could settle everywhere. On your clothes. On your skin. Inside your home. In your hair. The Nile provided life, but the desert was never far away. You wipe your face and look toward the bright horizon. The ancient Egyptians had developed clever ways to live in this difficult environment. But there were still things they could not escape. Heat. Dust. Insects. Disease. And the endless need for water. You step back into the sunlight. The afternoon is approaching. And soon, you are going to discover what ancient Egyptians actually did when the day's hardest work was finally over. The afternoon slowly begins to fade. The strongest heat of the day is finally passing, and people are starting to return from the fields. You walk back toward the settlement, tired from the long hours under the Egyptian sun. Along the way, you notice something interesting. Not everyone is rushing. Some people sit in the shade, talking quietly. Others repair tools, prepare food, or care for animals. Children move between the houses. Life is beginning to slow down. You stop beside a small home. Inside, the air feels darker and cooler than outside. The thick mud brick walls help keep some of the heat away. There is very little furniture. A few simple objects. Mats. Containers. Tools. Perhaps a small stool or wooden bed. Nothing looks luxurious. Yet the space feels familiar. It is a home. A place where people eat, rest, talk, and sleep. You sit down for a moment. After spending the day outside, even a simple shaded room feels comfortable. Then you hear the sound of food being prepared. The evening meal is beginning. Bread is once again an important part of the meal. There may also be vegetables, beans, dates, fish, or other foods available to the family. You realize something. For most ordinary people, ancient Egyptian life wasn't about enormous temples or golden treasures. It was about these small moments. Coming home after work. Eating with your family. Finding a little shade. Listening to the sounds of the evening. And hoping tomorrow will be another good day. Outside, the sun is slowly disappearing beyond the horizon. The Nile begins to reflect the fading light. For the first time today, you feel relaxed. But as darkness approaches, another part of ancient Egyptian life begins. The night. The sun has disappeared now. A soft darkness settles over the houses, and the heat of the day slowly begins to fade. You step outside and look toward the Nile. The river is almost completely quiet. There are no bright streetlights. No headlights. No glowing buildings in the distance. Instead, the darkness is broken only by small fires, lamps, and the pale light of the stars. For someone living in ancient Egypt, night would feel very different from the night you know. The sky would be enormous. And without the artificial light of modern cities, thousands of stars could fill it. You sit quietly near the doorway. The sounds of the settlement have changed. During the day, there were voices, animals, tools, boats, and footsteps. Now everything is slower. A few people are still talking. Someone is preparing the last meal of the evening. Others are getting ready to sleep. You begin to wonder where you will sleep tonight. There is no soft modern mattress waiting for you. Instead, you return to the simple sleeping space inside the home. Perhaps a woven mat. Perhaps a raised wooden bed. A light covering for the night. It isn't luxurious. But after the long day, you realize something surprising. You are exhausted enough that almost anything would feel comfortable. You lie down. The room is quiet. Outside, the Nile continues flowing through the darkness. You close your eyes. For a moment, ancient Egypt doesn't seem frightening at all. It feels peaceful. But then you hear something moving near the wall. A small sound. Then another. You open your eyes. You cannot see clearly in the darkness. And suddenly, you remember something modern life has made you forget. Ancient homes were not perfectly sealed. Insects and small creatures could enter. And tonight, you are going to discover just how difficult sleeping in ancient Egypt could really be. You remain still on the woven mat. The small sound comes again. A faint movement near the wall. Then silence. You slowly relax. It may only be a tiny insect moving through the darkness. But now that you are thinking about it, you begin to notice how different this ancient home is from a modern bedroom. There are no sealed windows. No electric fan. No air conditioner. No mosquito screen protecting you from every little creature outside. The warm night air moves through the room. You hear insects somewhere beyond the walls. You hear the distant sound of the Nile. And occasionally, an animal makes a quiet noise in the darkness. Yet the people around you seem completely accustomed to it. They have lived this way their entire lives. You begin to realize that comfort is relative. What would feel strange to you might feel perfectly normal to someone born here. The ancient Egyptians had their own ways of dealing with the heat and insects. Some people used oils and natural substances on their skin. Homes could be designed to make use of shade and airflow. Sleeping arrangements were simple, but practical. And slowly, your eyes become heavier. The sounds around you begin to blend together. The river. The insects. The distant voices. The soft movement of the night air. You close your eyes again. Tomorrow, the cycle will begin once more. The sun will rise. The Nile will shine. Farmers will return to the fields. Bread will be prepared. Water will be carried. And another ordinary day will begin. But before you fall asleep, you think about something. We often imagine ancient Egypt through its greatest monuments. Pyramids. Temples. Golden treasures. Pharaohs. But beneath all of that was something much simpler. Millions of ordinary moments. People waking up. People working. People eating. People laughing. People worrying. people falling asleep beside the same ancient river. And perhaps that is the most fascinating part of all. Because history was not only made by kings. It was lived by ordinary people. And tonight, for just a little while, you are one of them. The night passes quietly. And then, slowly, the darkness begins to disappear. A faint glow appears beyond the horizon. Morning is coming again. You open your eyes. For a few seconds, you forget where you are. Then you hear the familiar sounds of the Nile, the movement of people outside, and the quiet calls of animals. Another day in ancient Egypt has begun. You sit up slowly. Your body still feels tired from yesterday. But there is no time to stay in bed for long. The world outside is already waking. You step outside and feel the cooler morning air against your skin. The Nile reflects the first light of the sun. Birds move above the water. Boats begin to appear in the distance. And once again, people begin carrying water, preparing food, and getting ready for work. But now you notice something you didn't notice yesterday. The ancient Egyptians had adapted to this life. They understood the rhythm of the river. They knew when to plant. They knew when to harvest. They knew how to build homes that offered some protection from the heat. They knew which foods could be stored. They knew how to use simple materials to make clothing, tools, furniture, and countless everyday objects. Their world may seem primitive compared with ours. But it was not a world without knowledge. It was a world built around a completely different kind of knowledge. You walk toward the river again. The same river that gave people life could also bring danger. Floods could change the land. Disease could spread. A poor harvest could threaten a family. And yet, generation after generation, people continued living beside it. You stop for a moment and watch the sunlight spread across the water. Thousands of years have passed since these people walked here. Their houses disappeared. Their footprints vanished. But the river remains. And perhaps that is why ancient Egypt still feels so mysterious. The monuments survived. But the ordinary lives behind them are much harder to see. So today, we will look closer. Not at the pharaohs. Not at the pyramids. But at the ordinary people who woke up every morning and simply tried to live. The ordinary people of ancient Egypt lived within a world that was carefully connected. The farmer in the field depended on the river. The baker depended on grain. The fisherman depended on the Nile. And families depended on all of them. You walk through the settlement again, watching this invisible system at work. A man carries a basket of grain toward a storage area. Nearby, someone is repairing a wooden tool. A group of workers is preparing goods for transport. Nothing seems random. Everyone has something to do. Even children grow up learning the skills they will eventually need. There are no modern schools in the way you would recognize them, and education is not equally available to everyone. For many ordinary children, learning happens through family and work. A child watches a parent, then tries, then makes mistakes, then tries again. Over time, simple tasks become familiar. This is how knowledge travels from one generation to the next. You stop beside a craftsman working with his hands. His tools are simple, but his skill is not. He carefully shapes material into something useful. Looking at him, you realize another important truth. Ancient technology was not always about complicated machines. Sometimes it was about knowing exactly how to use simple things. Wood, stone, clay, rope, metal, water, human strength. With these basic materials, Egyptians created homes, boats, tools, furniture, jewelry, and enormous monuments. And somewhere beyond the ordinary streets, the great temples and pyramids were rising. But those famous structures were only one part of Egyptian civilization. Behind every monument were thousands of workers, farmers, craftsmen, traders, and families. People whose names history would never remember. People who simply woke up each morning and continued living. You keep walking. The sun is beginning to soften again. Soon another evening will arrive. But before the day ends, there is still one place you haven't truly explored. The ancient Egyptian home. And inside that home are the small details that reveal what everyday life really felt like. You step inside the small home. Compared with a modern house, it feels almost empty. There are no televisions, no electric lights, no kitchen appliances, and no rows of furniture. Yet every object has a purpose. A clay container holds water. Baskets store grain. Simple stools provide a place to sit. Mats cover parts of the floor. And in one corner, food is prepared for the family. The walls are made from mud brick. It is a simple material, but it is surprisingly useful. During the hottest parts of the day, the thick walls can help keep the inside cooler than the streets outside. You sit down on a woven mat. For a moment, you imagine living here permanently. No electricity. No internet. No refrigerator. No running water. No modern medicine. At first, the thought feels impossible. But then you notice something. The people around you don't seem to feel that anything is missing. This is simply their normal life. Their idea of comfort is different. A cool shaded room can be enough. A fresh meal can feel special. A quiet evening beside the Nile can feel peaceful. And a simple bed can become the perfect place to sleep after a long day. Outside, the sounds of the settlement slowly become quieter. The smell of bread and cooking fires drifts through the doorway. Someone nearby is telling a story. Another person is preparing tomorrow's work. Life continues without clocks, notifications, or schedules on glowing screens. You begin to understand that ancient Egyptian life wasn't necessarily about constantly struggling. There were difficult things, certainly. But there were also ordinary moments of comfort. Family. Food. Shade. Conversation. Rest. And the river flowing quietly nearby. As darkness begins to return, you step outside once more. Above you, the sky is becoming darker. And somewhere in that enormous ancient sky, the same stars are appearing that people here watched thousands of years ago. You look upward and wonder what they thought when they looked at those stars. The stars become brighter as the night deepens. You remain outside for a while, looking upward. To the ancient Egyptians, the night sky was not simply something beautiful to look at. It was part of the world they tried to understand. The movement of the sun, moon, and stars helped shape their ideas about time and the changing seasons. You notice how different the sky feels without modern city lights. There are no airplanes crossing overhead. No skyscrapers glowing in the distance. No electric lights washing out the stars. Just darkness. And an enormous sky. You begin to wonder what an ordinary Egyptian farmer might have thought while looking upward after a long day of work. Perhaps tomorrow's weather. Perhaps the next harvest. Perhaps family. Perhaps the gods. Religion was deeply connected to everyday Egyptian life. The ancient Egyptians believed their world was filled with powerful spiritual forces. The sun itself was connected with divine power. The Nile was essential to life. Death was not simply seen as the end. People prepared carefully for what they believed came after life. This belief influenced everything from burial customs to the construction of enormous tombs. But tonight, you are not standing inside a royal palace. You are standing beside an ordinary home. The same stars shine above you. The same river moves quietly nearby. And somewhere in the distance, a night watchman may be walking through the settlement. You slowly return inside. The room is dark and quiet. You lie down again. The woven mat feels simple beneath you. The air is warm. The sounds of the night are softer now. And as your eyes begin to close, you realize something. Ancient Egypt was not only a place of pyramids and pharaohs. It was a world of ordinary people trying to understand life, nature, the river, the sky, and what might come after death. For them, these mysteries were part of everyday existence. And tonight, beneath the same stars, you are beginning to see their world through their eyes. Morning comes again. The first light slowly spreads across the Nile, and another day begins. You wake to the familiar sounds of people preparing for work. But today, you notice something different. You are beginning to understand the rhythm of this world. The river rises and falls. The sun controls the working hours. Food follows the seasons. And life moves according to patterns that have existed for generations. You step outside and walk toward the river. A group of fishermen is already preparing their boats. They check their nets and gather their equipment. Fishing is not simply a way to find food. For many families, it is part of their livelihood. You watch a fisherman push his boat into the water. The wooden vessel moves quietly across the river. There is no engine. Only the sound of the oar touching the water. You follow the boat with your eyes until it becomes a small shape in the morning light. Then you notice something floating near the riverbank. A small piece of wood. Perhaps it came from a boat. Perhaps it was carried by the current. The Nile is always moving. And that movement connects distant communities. Boats can carry grain, fish, pottery, stone, and other goods along the river. In a world without highways or trains, the river becomes the easiest route through the country. You begin to imagine how different travel must have been. A journey that would take only a few hours today could become a long adventure. There are no maps on a phone. No GPS. No roadside signs. Instead, travelers depend on the river, landmarks, boats, animals, and their own knowledge. You sit beside the water for a moment. The morning breeze is gentle. The Nile shines beneath the sunlight. And for a few peaceful minutes, you simply listen. Water. Birds. Oars. Distant voices. It is hard to believe that this quiet scene belongs to a civilization that would leave behind some of the most famous monuments in human history. But the monuments are still ahead. And soon we will leave the ordinary village behind. To discover the enormous world that existed beyond it, you leave the riverbank and begin walking toward the larger settlement. The farther you go, the more people you see. Merchants carry baskets of goods. Craftsmen work with wood and clay. Farmers bring food from the countryside. Children move through the narrow streets, while animals rest in the shade. This is the part of ancient Egypt that is easy to forget. It was not an empty desert surrounding a few pyramids. It was a living civilization. People traded with one another, traveled along the Nile, built homes, raised families, and created things they needed every day. You pass a small market. There are baskets of vegetables, fish, grain, bread, and dates. Some people exchange goods directly. Others use forms of measured value when trading. The sounds are surprisingly familiar. People talk. People bargain. People laugh. Someone complains about the heat. Someone calls to a friend. For a moment, the thousands of years between your world and theirs seem to disappear. Then you notice the clothing. Most ordinary people wear simple garments suited to the hot climate. There is no modern fashion industry. No endless choice of colors and brands. Clothing is practical. It protects the body from the sun and allows people to move while working. You continue through the market. A craftsman is shaping a piece of wood. Nearby, another worker forms a clay container. You watch their hands. Their tools are basic, but their movements are practiced. They have learned these skills through years of experience. And suddenly you understand something important. Civilization does not begin with technology. It begins with people learning how to solve problems. How to grow food. How to store water. How to build shelter. How to travel. How to trade. How to work together. Ancient Egyptians solved these problems with the materials available to them. Stone. Clay. Wood. Fiber. Metal. And above everything, the Nile. You keep walking through the busy streets. But beyond the ordinary homes and markets, something enormous is waiting. A monument that would survive thousands of years. A structure so massive that even today, people still wonder how humans managed to build it. And as you approach it, the ordinary world of ancient Egypt begins to feel very small. The structure grows larger with every step. You can see it now. The pyramid rises above the landscape, enormous and almost impossible to comprehend. From a distance, it looked impressive. From nearby, it feels completely different. The blocks are enormous. The walls seem to disappear into the sky. You stand quietly, looking upward, trying to imagine the people who worked here thousands of years ago. There are no modern cranes. No trucks. No powerful engines. Yet somehow, stone after stone was moved, shaped, and placed. But remember, this is not really a story about a pyramid. It is a story about the people who lived around it. Workers needed food. They needed water. They needed shelter. They needed tools. Someone had to grow the food. Someone had to transport the stone. Someone had to prepare meals. Someone had to build homes. Someone had to make the tools. Behind every enormous monument was an enormous network of ordinary human effort. You look around. The workers are not all the same. Some carry materials. Some use tools. Some organize supplies. Others perform skilled tasks that require years of experience. The pyramid may belong to a pharaoh, but thousands of ordinary people are responsible for bringing the project to life. And suddenly, the monument feels less mysterious. Not because you understand exactly how every stone was placed, but because you begin to understand the human effort behind it. People working together, day after day, year after year, under the Egyptian sun. You take one last look at the pyramid. Then you turn away. The sun is beginning to fall again. And somewhere beyond these enormous stones, ordinary families are returning home. Preparing another simple evening beside the Nile. The evening is returning. You leave the Great Pyramid behind and walk back toward the homes along the Nile. The air feels cooler now. After the intense heat of the day, even a gentle breeze feels comforting. People are returning from their work. Some carry baskets. Some guide animals. Others simply walk home, tired and quiet. You notice how quickly the settlement changes after sunset. During the day, everything was bright and busy. Now the shadows grow longer. Small fires begin to glow. The smell of bread and cooked food fills the air. You enter a nearby home and sit down with the family. There is nothing extravagant about the meal. Bread, vegetables, perhaps beans, dates, or fish. But after a long day, the simple food feels satisfying. You listen to the people around you talking. They discuss ordinary things. Work, food, family, tomorrow. The same concerns that people have had for thousands of years. For a moment, you stop thinking about pyramids and pharaohs. You simply listen. And that is when ancient Egypt begins to feel strangely familiar. Because beneath the unfamiliar clothing, buildings, and customs, people were still people. They wanted their families to be safe. They wanted enough food. They wanted a comfortable home. They wanted their children to have a good future. They laughed. They worried. They rested. They dreamed. The Nile continues flowing outside. You step through the doorway one final time. The stars are appearing again. Tomorrow, the sun will rise. The farmers will return to the fields. The fishermen will return to the river. The bakers will prepare bread. And thousands of ordinary lives will continue. You slowly close your eyes. The ancient world becomes quieter. The voices fade. The river remains. And for a moment, you can almost imagine that you are still there. Resting beside the Nile, beneath an ancient Egyptian sky. But there is still one final thing to understand about life beside the Nile. It was beautiful. But it was never completely safe. The river provided food and water, yet life depended on its changing seasons. A successful harvest could mean enough food for a family. A difficult season could mean hunger. And beyond the river, the desert was always waiting. You look toward the distant horizon. The landscape seems endless. Sand stretches away from the green fields, reminding you just how fragile this narrow strip of fertile land really was. For ancient Egyptians, survival meant understanding this environment. They had to know when to plant, when to harvest, where to find water, how to store grain, how to protect food from insects and animals, and how to prepare for difficult times. Even ordinary people understood that nature could not simply be controlled. It had to be respected. You return to the house as the evening becomes darker. Someone lights a small lamp. The room fills with a gentle glow. You sit quietly and listen. There is something strangely peaceful about the simplicity of this life. No notifications. No traffic. No endless stream of information. Just the people around you. The warm air. The quiet Nile. And the darkness outside. You begin to feel sleepy. Perhaps this is what makes ancient history so fascinating. The world has changed enormously. But the basic rhythm of human life has not changed as much as we imagine. People still wake up. They work. They eat. They worry. They love their families. And eventually, they close their eyes and sleep. You lie down again. The sounds of ancient Egypt slowly fade into the distance. The Nile continues its endless journey through the darkness. And somewhere beyond the river, beneath the same stars, another ancient morning is waiting. For now, there is nothing left to do. Just rest. And now, the ancient day is finally coming to an end. The small lamp beside you burns quietly. Outside, the Nile continues to move through the darkness, just as it has done for countless generations. You close your eyes. Think about everything you have seen. The crowded streets. The farmers working beneath the sun. The fishermen moving across the river. The bakers preparing bread. The craftsman shaping simple materials into useful objects. The enormous pyramids rising above the desert. And the ordinary homes where families simply lived their lives. Ancient Egypt was not a perfect world. Life could be difficult. Heat could be exhausting. Disease could be frightening. Work could be hard. Food and water could never be taken for granted. But people adapted. They learned. They built. They created families. They shared stories. And they found moments of peace beside the Nile. That may be the greatest lesson hidden behind the pyramids. History is not only about kings. It is not only about wars. It is not only about monuments that survived thousands of years. History is also about the ordinary person who woke before sunrise, carried water, worked beneath the Egyptian sun, returned home tired, shared a simple meal, and finally lay down beneath the stars. That person may have left no name behind. No statue. No golden tomb. No famous inscription. But they lived. They dreamed. They loved. And for a short moment in the enormous story of humanity, their life mattered. Now imagine the ancient Nile one final time. The water is dark beneath the moon. The desert is quiet. The distant homes are sleeping. The stars are shining above the pyramids. And somewhere, thousands of years ago, an ordinary Egyptian is closing their eyes. Just as you are now. The modern world can wait. The pyramids can wait. Tomorrow can wait. For tonight, let the river carry the story away. Slowly breathe in. And slowly breathe out. The ancient world is becoming quieter. The voices are fading. The footsteps are disappearing. Only the gentle sound of the Nile remains. And as you drift deeper into sleep, remember, you didn't need to survive the entire ancient world. You only needed to spend one day there. And now, that day is over. Good night.